meandering, but anyways, I'd be glad to hear what the two respondents say, and glad to hear your questions too, so thank you.
Okay, then, thank you very much for your very interesting, what should I say, you're putting all this wonderful stuff in one very short presentation, in as short as 40 minutes or so, and then we will have comments first from Professor Key Beauregard and then from Professor Lee. Yeah.
Okay, I'll be experimenting with this mic here. Is that clear? If I speak through it, is that okay? It's really an honor to be here, and it's certainly a tough act to follow, Rob Wilson. My comments today are, in fact, speaking to Rob's book manuscript, which I read in proofs form, but it looks like it's pretty similar to the published version that Professor Lee has. So she's obviously much more diligent than me. She could find the actual book, whereas I'm just working with the page proofs. So in fact, as Rob is speaking, I think, to and through the book to larger issues, I hope that my contributions can also contribute to this larger conversation. Now, Rob describes his book project as an attempt to unpack and retrace the trajectory of conversion as a form of self-making and pluralized commitment to modes, mores, vocations, and vocations to beatitude. And when we're talking about beatitude, we're talking about, I think, any of the declarations made in the Sermon to the Mount. Am I right there, Rob? Yeah. So those are like blessed are the blah, 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 right? Mm-hmm. I mean, as we saw in a cartoon published, I think, in the Taipei Times on Sunday, there was, one of them said, blessed are the meek who shall inherit the earth, but not the oil and mineral rights. So there's always some kind of material aspect to this question, as Rob
Rowdingham had a poem, blessed are the meek, they shall inherit the earth's beer bottles, be able to bring them back for 5 cents.
But no oil and mineral rights. Now, Rob underlines that the notion of conversion can be a radically enabling process of self-making that is, in his account, intimately linked with the transformative reaches of poesis in U.S.-American transnational contexts. And in this way, Rob's project forcefully directs our attention to what he calls in the book's subtitle, An American Poetics. And this is an adjectival designation that I hope we can do a little more thinking about. I know Rob's already brought this up in terms of the question of naming of this manuscript and the sort of battles that you had with the press. But before I begin, I want to provide a short anecdote. Last week, I wrote an email to Ziming and to Shoujian, and since Rob cites emails in his book, I figured I can cite one too. I wrote at that time that I must admit that reading Rob's book manuscript is a pretty wild ride. I mean, it covers incredible territory. And indeed, when I read that Rob's energizing description of what he calls Deleuze's semi-crazed examples, I found myself silently nodding in readerly recognition. Yet, all the while, as I was going through the book, I found that Rob's generosity was really shining through, and I think we get a sense of that in his talk today as well. I especially appreciated Rob's willingness to address potentially skeptical readers on their own terms. Rob asks, why would anyone in these secular times want to invoke conversion or even counter-conversion in and across the waters, landscapes, and languages of redemption from New England and Hawaii, Tonga, Arizona, and the American Pacific? Why, Rob asks, in this attempt to challenge the cultural political modes of the contemporary and or modern U.S. empire, would one want to call conversion a post-colonial tactic of the utmost urgency and worldly importance? Indeed, why? Rob contends that given the deadening effect of our own cultural politics, and I wonder really who this our and we is in this instance, we need another mode of doing things, making things happen, Rob says, to act beyond the stasis of cynical reason or the relentless hermeneutics of suspicion. And for Rob, the idea of conversion in this context means the possibility of change and as a social project, the transformation from U.S. empire into a post-colonial republic, and as Rob says, the zone of eco-planetary becoming from Swanton. Is this in Santa Cruz County, or is another Swanton?
Yes,
Okay.
that's where Brother Antonius, William Everson, he gave us a set of talks called the Santa Cruz Meditations on
Okay.
region place.
From Swanton, Santa Cruz County, to Hilo, on the Big Island in Hawaii, and Taipei. Those are Rob's three sites: Swanton, to Hilo, and Taipei.
So I was thinking of that.
What would this look like? To think through this question, I'd like to draw attention to a couple of resonant moments, one of which has already been mentioned by Rob. The first moment I want to discuss appears in the remarkable epilogue to Rob's book, where he tracks in what I think is a really deeply moving and personal way some of his remarkable lines of flight. And at this point, I guess I would also wonder whether among the many forthcoming projects that Professor Shan noted in his introduction, whether there's any chance that we might get some kind of memoir from you, Rob. Because, you know,
If I can publish my poems, it has my whole life affected.
well, you know, I start to wonder whether there is some sense of life writing going on in terms of the lines of flight that are being tracked here. But the moment that I'm drawing attention to is one that Rob had mentioned, being in that large, restless lecture class on American literature at UC Berkeley in 1968. This is a moment where a young Rob Wilson listened to Frederick Cruz talk about a passage, as Rob mentioned, in Emerson's Nature. Now, in this remarkable moment, I found myself thinking, this is as I was reading Rob's account of this conversion, being taken out of himself, about the larger project of education in the humanities, a project that Spivak usefully describes as an uncoercive rearrangement of desires. And when Spivak is talking about this as being uncoercive, she's talking about it as being something not forced, right? Because if you're forcing someone to change their mind, whatever that is, that's not education in the humanities. Now, to be sure, the moment that Rob narrates here is a moment of deep complexity. The lecture class is restless. The teaching subject, Frederick Cruz, is what Rob calls the most unlikely of Emersonians. And the teaching text is also unlikely, a bulky, white, canonical Norton anthology of American literature. The potential for pedagogical disaster looms large, but something powerful nevertheless occurs. Yet, I wonder at this point how this profound moment of personal change, as signaled in narrative form through the transformation of this figure, Rob Wilson, can be articulated with larger social and collective projects, including the project of decolonization. Moment two. The second moment that I want to discuss appears much earlier in the manuscript, and that is in Rob's brief yet attentive reading of the autobiography of Malcolm X, and I think you already mentioned that in relation to Barack Obama. In this reading, Rob draws attention to the remaking of the figure of James Little into the figure we know of now as Malcolm X. As Malcolm observes in the book, the Muslims' X symbolized the true African family name that he never could know. Malcolm continues, "For me, my X replaced the white slave master name of Little, which some blue-eyed devil named Little had imposed on my paternal forebears." Here, for me, the limits